Girls are on.
If you ever want to look at this,
We're just kind of figuring out. Yeah. I still want to work. Thank you.
We like it. All right. We can start. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did not have break on that time. No, I.
All right, calling our meeting to order. Julia, if you can roll call.
Mayor Flower,
Here.
Alderman Berry,
Here.
Alderman Burr,
Here.
Kiefer,
Here.
Murray, here, Ms. Breezy, here, Holloway.
All right, and then we had minutes from last week's meeting.
Yep, it's all good.
Okay, so you gotta find them.
Yep.
We need to pass those to last week too, though?
Yes.
Section. That's section, but, all right, so we got a motion, we have a second.
Second.
All right, we got 2 seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the guest period, and I'm gonna say this up front, we've got potentially thousands of people watching us tonight. It's probably unlikely, but we have a bunch of people, because we're doing the webcam and live stream for this. So it's the first one we've done city sponsored, just as a heads up, it's the same deal. So just to give us some order though, we're gonna have a water discussion after the guest period. So if you have a guest comment that has anything to do with anything other than water, you can do that. If you want to talk about water, we're going to do that more afterward. We're going to do like a session where the board's going to talk, kind of discuss what we're trying to do, go over some numbers. And then if you have any questions you have, we'll probably have a little more latitude on that one as a discussion, since we're trying to kind of do some general outreach on that. So we'll at some point we cut it off, but I got to kind of see how it goes. On the guest period though, if you have anything else at all beyond water, if you want to just however you want to. And you should have a speaker card. You can give that to Julie when you come up. So is there anybody that wants to talk on anything? And that would include any, it's not a public hearing on other projects. So if the only time you'd have a chance to talk on your zoning or something.
My speaker card's over there somewhere.
Okay. Well, you can just tell her your name and address.
Okay. My name is John Creamy, and I'm 16849 Interbush Lane. And I'm actually speaking on the St. Andrews planning and zoning recommendation for R5C. And there's a couple issues that, I think done a pretty good job with stormwater and some buffer. But we still have some issues with, the traffic and the entrance. Particularly, I did some research looking at St. Louis County, and that entrance is supposed to be, or they recommend it being 70 to 90 degrees, and that is a very, tight entrance. It's also at a curve, and if you go to the left, there's a little bit of a rise in the hill, so there's a line of sight issue that, if you drive down that, drive out of it, you can actually see. So at this point, what I would like to see done is to see us do some type of traffic assessment or traffic study. North Street, from what I hear, cannot be expanded. And so we have some restrictions there. We are going to have 18 villas across the street from St. Andrews, and who knows what else is going to be coming up from Forby Road. So for the safety of both the residents of St. Andrews and the residents in Forby and in Interbush Estates and everybody else, I'd like to see us take this a little slow and to get something done to just make sure that if there is changes that need to be done, that we get them done now, because once this gets developed, maybe there's changes that cannot be made, and we have safety issues. As a part of that, and I guess you guys can understand this, is it's a rezoning. So the rezoning is R5C. It says 2 parking spaces per unit. They're going to put in 149. That looks good. But I think to myself, what happens if they leave? It's R5C. They can have 200 spaces or 210. That's the way it reads. We don't have a minimum on it. We just say we recommend 200. So I worry that future development could cause any more problems to that corridor. So at this point, I know some other people will speak. I did go and talk to a few people in the subdivision. And I can give you some addresses, but I had 9 people that I talked to right before I came here that agree with the idea of traffic. I had one person that had concerns about privacy. But I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that sometimes people don't come up here. It doesn't mean that they're for it. It just means that they might have kids at home, which I found in a couple of instances. So I appreciate your time. I hope that you think about this, because I really do think it's kind of a safety issue. And thank you.
Thanks. And again, on the comments back for this, that's on St. Andrews, we'll probably address them all. I'm writing them down. We'll address them as we kind of go through the actual presentation of the zoning too.
Who wants to go?
Yeah, you can probably hit it off and tell her else to do.
Hi, my name is Bill Petrie. I'm also addressing the St. Andrews situation. I don't think anybody is necessarily opposed to them developing on it, besides the fact that there is some issues that we don't really quite fully understand, and we don't know if everything has been thought out. Something as simple as a stop sign at the end of St. Andrews, I don't know if anybody has ever seen it. There's not a stop sign there. It's a dangerous curve already. I don't know how it's going to be, especially coming up, and people trying to come out. That is a bus stop right there now, and if you start to pull out of St. Andrews and there's a car coming and you decide that, oh, I want to get out, you're going to hit your gas kind of hard, and then you're going to be hitting towards my kids that are standing at the school bus. Not happy about that. I'm very concerned what it does to my personal property value. I am in the back, and my hill goes like this, and then they're going to build a unit that's 2 stories tall, 25 feet off my property line, which is only about 15 feet deep. I could put a 10-foot, 12-foot privacy fence there, and I'm still not going to have anything except the site of this very large building. When I bought my property, we actually came up here to see what it was zoned, because we were afraid of this. So that is another concern. I know that's maybe a couple other people that live right near me. Let's see. Oh, there is a school function going on today. I was also walking around with John, and several of those people were not able to come here because of that. And the other thing was, if anybody has ever been back there, that is all bedrock. Most of those houses had to be pounded out or blasted out. I know they say they're not gonna blast, but they also talked about planting a bunch of trees. We tried that in one of the other subdivisions where they kind of drilled through the concrete and they poured it in the dirt, and then 2-3 years later, all those trees died. So that would not really be, in my opinion, an acceptable resolution for trying to, cover some of that area up. And I think John hit most everything else that I wanted to say. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kim Litzaw. I have lived on Bush Lane since 2013, and I have worked for the Rappahannock School District for 20 years. So I just want to piggyback on what those two gentlemen said about this development. The people at St. Andrews have been gracious, and the engineering people, all of them could not have been more kind and put more time and effort into working with us. So applause to them that they seem to be doing the right thing. Two areas of concern have come up over and over again. One is traffic, as you've heard, the other is water. And so we all know about the problems in Eureka, not with the drinking water, but all the other runoff water. We've had several people with the recent flooding that had literal rivers in their backyards. And so even though the civil engineers tell us this will all be taken care of, that's still a big concern. So please keep that in the forefront of your mind. Just a pause and some more research. Thank you.
My name is Wayne Moreski, and I live at 743 Underwood over in Underbush Lane. And I will concur with what she said. The people involved here, including the city of Eureka, have been more than gracious and professional in what they've tried to resolve, from the water to the privacy, which we're all concerned about. They are more than willing to work with us and have been. I guess what I would like to ask to be part of the plan is, what if this doesn't work? I mean, engineers are engineers, they're human beings. If it doesn't work, many of us might not be here to solve the problem. So I'm kind of asking in the plan that we go forward, is there some kind of a security, whether it's an escrow or something, if we get down the road 2 years and this is a total failure, who's gonna fix it? City of Eureka's not gonna wanna fix it, the people of Underbush are not gonna wanna fix it, and probably St. Andrews is gonna say it's no longer our liability. So I would like implemented something of a security, whatever form that you would deem necessary, so that we have some kind of a confidence down the road that we can all be good neighbors as we have been for the last 19 years. Thank you.
That's right, thank you.
Hi, my name's Jacob Herzog, and I live next door. I second what everyone else said. My other concern was, kind of touched on what Bill said with the bedrock. Our yard is also very rocky. I worry about, they say they're gonna put a retention pond back there. And our neighbors who couldn't be here on the other side of us, they had like their basement flooded 3 times this year with all the water runoff, and, just with the development going so close to our property lines, I was just worried about, water issues. They say a curb will catch it, but if we get a heavy rain, is the curb gonna catch it? Can they do a retention pond? And I mean, I guess, is that retention pond gonna go down into our neighborhood's retention pond, which almost overflowed this year? So that is a big concern for me, as well as the privacy with us having a lot of children in the neighborhood and grandchildren for some of the older folks and stuff. So thank you.
Thanks. You need no introduction.
I got just one question. Looking at the old real estate map of Eureka and counting the sewers and water connections, old and new, what shall our accounts go up per month?
Got what? Water and sewer, we're gonna have it, we got charts and stuff, we're gonna talk about that after this, on all sorts of detail on that, we haven't decided yet.
We need to know what's gonna show up on that every month.
I'll answer that. You gotta see your current. All right, anybody else on sewer or water? Or anything else except sewer water, I'm sorry. That was our discussion, how to go over. How was, anybody else, anything that is not, if this will be the last time, if like some projects or if it's anything else that's not on the agenda, if you want to do guest period time, this is it. So going once, twice, all right, that'll be the close of the guest period. So, on all the St. Andrews stuff, we'll address that when we do the presentation, but, we want to get, we had everybody here in the full size. We're moving into this section here on our agenda, it says water and sewer rate discussion. So I'll kind of kick it off and, we're gonna, I might actually walk over and put some of these boards up and things like that as we go around, so this will be a little, different. So basically what we're trying to do is set up a, so when we had that last election, there was a ton of talk about water. And we'll leave these up after we get done, but what we did is, and this is, the scope of our conversation is not about, really water quality upgrades. It's not about making the water more drinkable. It's not trying to do anything. It's just that when we got into the initial system, we did an analysis on it. And our system, even as it stands right now, basically we spend more to produce water and sewer, to treat it or to provide it than we do to actually, than we collect. So the city has a deficit when it provides the service. So let's see, water is water, water, water. All right, so those are all sheets that show some different numbers I'll do, and then we're gonna put those online afterward. So the goal of what I'm trying to talk about here is, before you can even start talking about upgrading your system or making it better or trying to make any of the decisions we have, I think we have a decision to make as a city as to what are we gonna do with water and sewer as far as, are we gonna have it cost us more than what it, I mean, are we gonna basically take money and not collect enough to pay for the service, or do we at least wanna have that, we wanna get the water and sewer position where it funds itself, where it's close. In addition, when you look at the numbers, and I'll give you an example, if you look at your sanitary sewer right now, we've got a number that basically, I would say like an income and revenue number. It shows that for the last, we've had a year where sometimes we lose a little, we collect less than what we spend. Sometimes we make, we have a little bit more, but it usually is right around 100, say 100 to, 125 lost to maybe 180 in a year where you have more. The problem with that number is though, that has no collection right now. We don't do anything for capital improvements. Like if we had, say, we have some things that are upcoming on like our sewer plant, or if you had sections of line in the city that you might want to do on regular maintenance, or you replace it or repair it, or different things that you would normally do. Instead of waiting for it to break, you'd have a regular maintenance program, maybe more people to inspect. We don't have that type of redundancy in the system. So when you get to the sanitary sewer on the P&L, or I'm sorry, the water, we definitely have a much bigger issue as to what we collect or don't collect. We don't, for the last several years, we haven't come really close to collecting what we spend to produce water. And actually last year, partially this is because we spent quite a bit of money trying to assess our systems, where it really starts to show. So we spent quite a bit of money with some engineers because everybody's talking about trying to improve the water. But as we've spent that, we looked at this last year and we spent close to $700,000 as a city more on water than we actually collected from, businesses and residents to for the water, for that direct service. So what you run into is, you run into a problem where we start having to make some choices, where if we're going to have a system that takes, if we're providing that service for less than it costs, that money still has to get paid somewhere. So what you end up doing is the residents pay that from sales tax and from other taxes that we have that you could use for road improvements, that you could use for other projects that are around the city. And instead, we're, in my opinion, you end up subsidizing water bills, and it's kind of an unfair system. For instance, I have like a sprinkler at my house in a large yard. Well, as you use more and more water at these rates, I mean, it's a big boom. If you're a heavy water user, it's a great deal. If you're a smaller water user, in effect, you're kind of subsidizing these heavier water users. So it's a really, in my opinion at least, it's an unfair way to bill because you have a big subsidy. But on top of it, it starts to take money away from other services and other things you need to do. Plus, we don't even budget right now on the water side as well. There are things that we should be doing more of, like flushing lines, more maintenance systems, all sorts of things other services do that we do not budget for. We don't have the staff to. And we've even seen that with some of this incremental work where we've tried to update our system and do some of the improvements this last year. We haven't had enough funding to do it. Or, we're a little short staffed. It just takes a while to do anything if we have it. We're very good at fixing stuff if it's an emergency or something breaks, but that's not really, as the system continues to age, that's going to get harder and harder to do. So in light of that, and again, I have not brought up, and intentionally, right, when you guys have the comments, I have not brought up anything about the taste or the water quality or TDS or any of the things that are going on. As another side note, we have a letter of intent out with Missouri American Water. They're evaluating our whole system, and they're interested. They're going to come back and say, they'll tell us whether they're interested in maybe purchasing our system, providing an offer. The city would have to vote on it. I don't have any of that information yet. I don't know what they're going to do. So that's really not something I'm trying to get on the topic tonight, just to kind of keep it in order. But what I did do is work with staff to try and come up with, and it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be these numbers, but I provided a proposed rate structure to try and get the system, regardless of what happens with BOA American, or regardless of what happens with other improvements. I personally believe that the water and sewer system should pay for themselves, and that they should have a maintenance number in them, and that they should be, if you're going to have a city do the services, they ought to at least be, you ought to be able to do maintenance, you ought to be able to take on projects, and you ought to have a reserve in there where you can have enough people, have redundancy to provide that service. So what I had proposed was to take, and then the other thing I think was important is simplification, because even in our water and sewer rates, we have tons of different rates that are, and the way we do it is very hard to compare to other places. So as we've gone through and looked at how other people bill, it can be hard to get apples to apples, because how we do stuff is not necessarily the industry norm when you compare it to some of the other big providers. So the second two boards you'll see up there, so I basically have an income and revenue statement that goes back the last 4 years and includes one projected year for water and sewer. And then the next one we have is the individual, what we could do on residential rates, a proposal on a rate. And my target was basically to say, what could we target the rates at on the residential? And we're going to follow up with this on a commercial one as well. It just is more complex. But how can we target it so that we could raise enough money that we can look at it and say, our system has redundancy in it. You can provide for maintenance. You can provide for some capital improvements. You can basically staff it a little more robustly. You can do more maintenance and do things on the system on a regular basis. So I had proposed, and you'll see it on the different lines, taking up, changing how we do our base rates. And again, this can get blindingly boring, to be frank with you. But normally, these utility meetings, if you were at one of the bigger utilities, you'd be down at Jeff City arguing with experts on regulators, and everybody going back and forth. But basically what I'm saying is if you use right now, so let's just do pure sanitary sewer. Right now, if you use, and this is, again, I'll just continue to be extremely boring. If the only way we measure, we don't have sewer meters on your house. So the only way we measure sewer, how much you use, is we look at your water bill in, I believe it's January. So it's your lowest water use month. And we say, okay, we're going to assume that all the water that came in went out. And that's what we use as your average. We use that all year, so you're not really going to see your bill change. It's whatever your January water bill is the gallons we assume for sewer, which is fairly common. So I guess that means all of you will go home and you won't hardly use any water in January. So I can say that on my TV. That would be the place. I can't wait to see this thing upside down the first year. So anyway, but when you go through, you look at, that's how sewer works. But if you look at our current rates, if you had 1,000 gallons of water, which is kind of it's not a normal user, but at our low rate, you would pay $10 a month. If you were in an MSD rate for the same gallons, you'd pay $26 a month. And if you were in a smaller district like Jeff County, where Marisol and Windswept is, you pay $31.87. So for the same gallons, you know, we're at $10 right now for something, you know, you're 2.5 times less than what MSD does, and you're roughly 3 times less than what a private district over in Jeff County is for the same service on sewer. So what I proposed was, based on our numbers, I proposed taking that base rate from 10 to 17.50, and then we had a charge on top of that that was, I believe it's $2.50, basically $2.50 every 1,000 after that. So we'd also did an average. We said, okay, what's the average resident use? That would be a $13 sewer bill is right now the average. If you're at, you know, again, if we would be going to a proposal that would put you about $35 a month. If you compare what you did, the same gallons would have been at MSD, you're at 64, and at the Jeff County, you're more like 50. So even with this increase, we would greatly heal up our system, but you would still be half the rate of MSD and a little more than half the rate of a Jeff County sewer district. So even after the increase you're looking at, you're still way below what you'd pay basically anywhere else but here. And that's on the sewer. If you jump over to the water, again, I had the same type of analysis. Now water, we measure on a water meter. The way we are right now, you pay $11.55 for the first 2,000 gallons, which is again kind of those anomalies. A lot of the other places are based on the first 1,000. So what I was talking about doing there is simplifying and saying, okay, at 1,000 gallons instead of $11.55, you go to $17.50. And then we have a per gallon charge. It goes up $2.50 every 1,000 hours. Again, there's no magic to it. Just somebody had to propose something here to get started on it. And it basically, again, it takes you from maybe the average person pays $24 a month here in water. That would drop down. That would increase to $45. And again, these are averages over the whole city. But again, by perspective, if you look at it, our current rate of $11.55 for 1,000, and actually it's actually more off because it's $11.55 for 2,000 gallons. For the first 1,000 gallons, you would do in Jeff County, Marisol or Windswept, you get $26. So we're on. I mean, you're more than 3 times more expensive there for the first. I mean, it's way out of whack. And at MOAM, you're at 18. So you know you're getting close to where we're at. So we're looking at a $45 on average, and if your average bill for the same usage was at Marisol's 51 and you're 66, you're still significantly below the other 2 providers. But you're getting closer because the water does have a cost here that's going. So basically, that in a nutshell is I could talk about this and continue to bore you to death, but the idea is I threw out a proposal, which the board has had a chance to see. I'm going to kind of throw that in the comments, but again, my goal is to put enough money in there broadly over the whole system so that we can become, at least when we go into these votes or we go into proposals with All American, I think it's important that we know where we're at with our water system. And with this rate increase, we would at least know I've got a stable system. I can hire, I'm not in an emergency, you know, it's not like it's the end of the world. But the choice at that vote then would be, it would be more of a water quality upgrade at that point. You're going to say, do I want to start putting reverse osmosis in? Do I want to take my quality and make it as good as some of these other places? Then we would need to increase rates further to do that. Or you can look at how much more is All American, but you're going to be looking at a rate. You're not going to be looking at, okay, I'm not sure they can maintain their system. I'm not sure they, you know, we have enough staff. I got that. If we fund it properly, you're going to be looking at more of a quality. But you also will be bringing the rates much closer together than what they are now. But at the end of the day, sewer and water costs, we're not that much able to produce and do this cheaper than everybody else out there either. There's a reason. So these things have needed to be adjusted for a long time, and that's my proposal on it. So I'd go around with you guys, and I figure we give the board a chance to comment on it, and then I'll let whoever come up and talk for a bit. We'd love to get your feedback.
I'll go first. I think that we need to do these proposed rates increase. The reason being is that, between the 2, we're losing close to $1 million in both the sewer and the water, which could be then used for street repairs, could be used for a lot of different purposes throughout the city. And we're not really that far off from where we are right now. We're very competitive with anybody else. So, I think it's needed for the city in order to get back into a more of a balanced budget type of situation. And utilize those monies for other purposes within the city.
In one comment, just add on, you're not saying that the water and sewer money be used for street improvements, but you're saying because we're not losing money, you don't have to subsidize the system, so you have the money available to do other.
Right, the money that we're now subsidizing, our water and sewer will now be reallocated and used in a better way.
And I agree with, it should be a wash, it shouldn't be costing us money, but I think you have to get to a place where you can make a decision later on about whether or not American Water wants to buy from the same point of view. Right now, it would be apples to oranges. You want to get to the level set so you can make a good decision.
Another point I would like to make out though too is that we do need additional people in our water department. What this will do is it'll give us income in order to hire additional people. It'll also give us revenue in order to set up a reserve, because we don't have reserves right now for redoing, if a water tank breaks, we don't have the funds in order to buy a new one, build a new one. We don't have funds to paint them, repair them, whatever. We don't have a maintenance reserve. So again, what this does is it gives us that ability to have a reserve.
I think, Sean, as far as the water and sewer, with our size of our population, we have so much more regulations from the state and federal level. We need to have a surplus to cover some of those costs.
We're not trying to make money, all we gotta do is break even. And then we can assess it later on, I think, if we have to adjust it again. But if you start looking at the numbers on there, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, in one comment, both of you guys were saying that, Maria, I think it goes to your point. One of the advantages of the rate, it's not just going up, but it's actually changing how we do it to match kind of the same format as these other districts. So when it comes time, a question I get a lot of times is, if you're going to sell to America and you want to do it, that's great how the city works, but how does it affect my personal water bill? And unless the way you bill is pretty similar, like X amount of gallons here or there, it's very hard for us to put them on an even basis because we bill slightly different. So this will help us, the reset is also organizational. So it'd be a lot easier to compare them, even though you could really tell what the difference is after the restructure too. So, go ahead, Carlene or Jerry.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's something that we need to do. It's been long overdue. I don't know what happened in the past or why the rates hadn't gone up with the each year or each quarter or each whatever. It's time for us to step up and make sure that we're not caught in a hole and can take care of the city to the best of our ability.
I actually agree with what everyone's saying, so, it's our current rates are extremely inexpensive in comparison to a lot of other districts, and it's something that's needed in order to at least not get further in the hole, so.
All right, we've given you as much boring information as possible. We can drag it out and do something else, but come on up and tell us what you think or what you want to know or whatever. Just come on up to the mic, say your name and everything, and then we'll take notes. And that way it kind of helps. So we just want to, another thing is we don't want everybody to feel like, hey, we did it one night, we didn't talk to anybody, we didn't do anything. So we are listening to what's going on, we want to get your input, so we're interested. But
Mr. Mayor, Paul, my name is Tony Stoker. I live at 719 Vista Glen. About 2 years ago, I brought a petition representing 450 homes, which asked you to do exactly what you're busy doing right now, is to present us with options and what the costs would be so that we could make an informed decision. So I appreciate where you're going with this. And the comment I really wanted to make this evening was, by doing this, it means that there was a lot of opposition to some of the alternatives that were going to be considered. But if you were running this at a loss, it wasn't a fair comparison. So, for example, if you look at Missouri American and you say, wow, that's $60, we were only 13, but we really weren't 13 because we're actually 45 or whatever it is. So it makes the decision that we need to make about improving the water quality would be a better decision because we have real numbers. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Did you put that in your packet?
Bishop 17436, Top Road, Eureka, Missouri. I think that we owe it to everyone to enlist Bartlett West to look at our source system. We've assigned over to Missouri American without anybody on our side doing an independent study of our source system. It just got packaged with water and said, look at it and tell us what it's worth and what you think. Bartlett West has the ability to come in and assess our entire source system and tell us where we have deficits, where we're in violations, or that we're running perfectly. They can come up with the numbers of what it costs to effectively run it and what it's going to look like in the future with growth in relation to EPA DNR requirements. Right now, we only have Missouri American who might be interested in purchasing it, doing the report. So I would ask that the board and the city would enlist Bartlett West to do a study on our sanitary system, our sewers and everything, so we have equal information to compare. I don't think it's wise not to have that. As far as the water and everything goes, I do not argue with what you're saying about the increase on the water. I will note this. We had started with Bartlett West. The board had agreed to go ahead and start capping a well out at the Legends. That all got stopped when Missouri American study started. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is in the Bartlett West reports that I reported on the last time that I was here, they said that in one of their charge for around $8, I don't remember the exact figure, that it would allow all of the wells for an $8 a month increase for everyone to be upgraded to reverse osmosis and to put additional personnel on. The $500,000 for chemicals, for salts and different things that are relational to the system we run now would come out of that budget. So we would get a lot of that money back that they're saying that we're low on and that we're taking a beating on, and we are. But if we would go forward with these improvements, we wouldn't need the $500,000 for chemicals for that system. So all I'm saying is we need to be careful. We need to make sure we're getting all the information. I'd like to be assured that every Bartlett West report has been listed on the website. Nothing redacted, nothing held back. Everything's been posted so that we all have the availability to look at it. As far as what they're saying, they're exactly right. This water situation and what they're charging for it should have never been. And there does need to be an increase. And I don't have a problem with what you're asking. I'm in agreement with you. And that, not to have a reserve for your infrastructure, not to have emergency funds for this, that's ridiculous. That's just poor administrative management. So they do need this increase. My question is why did we vote to go forward, cap wells, and improve the water quality out of the Legends, and then all of a sudden after it's approved, kill it? Because we would have went from half the corrosivity of the water by doing that, because they're sitting on the most corrosive water of all. I've got one client over there went through 7 water heaters since 2001. So anyway, average home uses 5,000 gallons a month. That's the national standard. So when you're getting quoted these 1,000, 2,000 numbers, the average national standard is 5,000 gallons. My only other question to the board and administration is, why is commercial so much cheaper than residential? Why wouldn't they pay the same as us? And other than that,
Let me, while you're up there, because
Sure.
I did a couple of good ones. On the sewer, I think where we're at is before we would ever do a move, I agree with you, we would want to assess that system.
Thank you.
So we've actually that's actually been a concern, and Craig and I have sat together too, because there are upcoming improvements to that system that are like, I mean, we're hearing it from the regulators anyway. So it's definitely something that's there. I just think that, again, we're trying to eat the things that are coming in, so we figured it doesn't hurt to get Moen running. At the same time, but you know what I'm saying, but I agree with what you're saying as far as evaluating that system, we should have the same information.
We should have an independent representing us.
And that makes sense, and I think, and that's what I'm saying before, even if All American, and it's a little off topic, even if they showed up and said, we're gonna do this, it's not gonna be a rush to do that, we're gonna have all sorts of, there will be a whole lot of time, and say, okay, how do you compare it, what could you do, what options, so, but that's what I'm saying, if we don't, kind of, we're saying here, if we don't do this, we'll be mixing the issues, because we're,
No, I
how do I stop, you know? So
We
anyway.
gotta stop the bleeding.
The one on the cap up there, I'm not sure, I have to look at, but I know some of the issues in the legends and the improvements Bartlett and West had suggested, they had different items. Again, part of the reason we stopped is because we were $700,000 in the hole on it. And I said, before we keep spending money out of other accounts, we need to figure out what we're doing overall as a system. So I'd be a lot more comfortable if we knew we had the proper funding to do it. And I think that was one of the issues, while the funding was getting way, you're seeing big numbers because all of a sudden you've got a lot of money in engineering. And even these, we looked at different things you could do with wells where you raise lower wellheads to get better quality water. So there's all sorts of possible things out there in addition to reverse osmosis.
Right.
But they're all expensive. I don't want to keep running that dollar bill up without, it's like if you're losing money, you don't keep, so that was kind of the thought process on it. And there may be a different product, you may be talking about something different, but that's the line to it. And then the, let's see, what's changed, there's this one. And then I'll ask Craig, I had Craig look one more time, he should have everything we have from Bartlett and West up, and there's nothing ran through that.
How about the commercial versus residential?
Oh, that was, here's the deal on commercial versus residential. The way that commercial and residential is worked in the city, there are a ton of different rates. So what we wanted to do was evaluate that at a second meeting where we could detail all the different, like Six Flags.
So you're gonna look at it.
It's the next thing on there, and I agree with this.
Six Flags is its own program.
But it has part of it doesn't have, so it's like we have all, but if you go through a ton of businesses have different.
But you are gonna
rates,
take a look at
they're gonna definitely get assessed and they're gonna.
Okay, so that's fair. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Anybody else in the discussion? Come on. That's why they're gonna blame me, it's flowers, trying to shut this thing off. All right, guys, if there's nothing else, no one wants anything, great. We're gonna get back into our normal meeting. And again, I'd give you an opportunity, if you came just for water, you got the shot to leave, I'll take a minute and as much as you're. I don't care about saying that. So is anybody else, if you wanna go and you're just here for water, but if not, you're good.
I'm so glad. Now you can talk about me. I'm going.
All right, so you'll see it on TV.
What a nice guy.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got item 5, temporary caterers permit application. I just have to say it because it is live stream, it's for Miss Kitty's area at Six Flags. So is there any information we all need on that or motion?
I don't have an issue with it, I'll make approval.
Second.
Approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed to Miss Kitty's? All right, passes. All right, now we're going into the planning and zoning recommendations. First one we had was for the 601 Howard Lane mini storage facility, which is recommended for approval. I believe that Leslie's, we asked you since you're at the meeting, we get a summary, and then do you want to do a report on it, or if the board does, I can have them up.
No, it went through the P and Z meeting pretty well. They do have a water detention area on the south edge of the property. The only thing that was added to their petition was the fact that the water detention area would be fenced in so that people would not accidentally go into it, particularly kids and that type of thing.
So with the water retention area and it holds water, who's responsible for treating it for larvae and stuff like that? Are they?
That would be the property owner. Yeah, the people that are got the petition to do the storage facility, because it's their detention center, detention area.
I mean, you guys want a presentation? I mean, I can hang them up if you guys want a presentation, if you don't need it, it's up to you guys.
I'd like a presentation.
Hello, good evening. My name is Terry Barr, address 6576 Highway 100.
Can you do me a favor and move the presentation? Sorry. I've seen this trick pulled, and I've tried it myself many times.
Trying to pull it over onto that.
No.
So, representing Nesto Ventures and asking for approval of a special use permit at 601 Howardson to allow for mini storage. We have a just under 40,000 square foot storage facility, fully fenced perimeter, gated entry, 24-hour video surveillance, all concrete drives. And that's about it, pretty simple plan. So again, I'd be happy to answer any questions. What he was asking about the water quality, yes, the water quality is in the detention plan as far as holding water and then filtration system for that.
That's a dry one, right? It's not retention, it's the detention, so it's a dry basin.
I believe there'll be a detention basin and then a filtration basin as well. Yes.
So is it just, the detention basin, is it, all of that concrete? I know that there are minimum standards. Is there, did you guys go above the minimum standards at all?
The engineers, they're still running those calculations, but they will be designed for a maximum of the acres that we're doing here. I'm not sure that there would be anything over that, but we need to be looking into that.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. So it's, I was getting confused on this, so we get there and we gotta read it in the last second. There's like these passes. All right. St. Andrews, come on up, let's do the presentation.
Good evening, my name is Brad Quinn, I'm the executive director at St. Andrews and Francis Place. And I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the overall development, and I'll invite Paul Boyer, our engineer, to come up and give a little bit more specific details to the plan. What you're looking at here is we've identified 24 patio design layout. So it's designed to have 2 units above at the higher grade, 2 units below each one of these. There's a total of 24. Which equals 96 units. So one thing that we like about this design and selected intentionally is it encompasses what we call a pocket neighborhood design. And so what that is basically, it's built around neighborhoods versus built around streets like what we would normally see. So there's common ground that's shared. You'll notice in this design there's different things such as gazebos, fire pits with seating, bocce ball court, pickleball court. There's an exercise circuit that runs through the middle of the design, and each one of these circles represents like an exercise station. Now this trail doesn't have any more than a 5-degree slope to it, so it should make it pretty easy for our seniors to do exercise around the campus. So it's really meant to be an interactive social, promote socialization amongst the neighbors in the community. The homes are approximately 1,000 square feet each and comprised of an open concept, including like the kitchen, living room. It'll have dining room space, master suite with bath, walk-in closet, den, laundry, porch, and a deck and/or patio on each one of them. Each one of the units will be fully sprinkled. And we're going to try to incorporate some of the technology that exists on the market, such as the smart design, the smart lighting, and a lot of the other things that are now starting to gravitate towards the seniors. We've been looking quite a bit into that, going to different expos and checking into those things. The design, the last thing I'll mention, also happens to have at the bottom here like a community space, a clubhouse. So we envision doing dining, maybe some exercise and some different social engagements down there. We think it'd be a nice complement to the design. So again, that's just a brief introduction to the design, and with your approval, I'd like to invite Paul Boyer up to.
Can we ask you a couple questions?
Sure, absolutely.
So on the front, just from my end, so St. Andrews, tell me about the existing facility that's there.
So yeah, up here at the top, you'll notice to the left, this is the current care center. So it's a 106-bed skilled nursing home. This design, this development we're talking about tonight is really independent living, so it's a completely different model.
Describe that. What happens when you-
So skilled, yeah, just briefly, skilled care is really kind of the most extreme need of care, the heaviest care possible. So these are the residents that would be the most dependable to get their primary daily care done. So independent living is really designed just to be senior housing. It's designed to really take the overhead and the maintenance of owning your own home off your shoulders, so.
So do you have, like, when you say skilled care, those are nursing available there all the time? What type of services?
Yeah, up in the care center, we have 24-hour skilled care, 24/7 all year round. The independent living will not have any of those, so there'll be an opportunity if the person living in the patio home would need some à la carte services, there would be some options there for them to do that, but there won't necessarily be, dedicated staff that'll be coming down there, other than some housekeeping and some things like that.
So how do you, are there restrictions on who can live there, or how do you guys say how you keep me out?
Yeah,
It
so
sounds lovely.
there'll be an age requirement, 65.
Okay, so there's a 65 minimum, you have to be 65 or older.
Yeah. And so,
So is
Yeah,
that
it'll
common
be
with your
just-
other, have you done a facility like this before, you've built on it, is that common in skilled nursing next to, is that just kind of looking to have that next, so is it kind of where you might move from one to the other over time?
correct, yeah, so in one of the wings in our care center, we have short stay rehab. So it is designed so that the seniors here can age in place, and if they should have an immediate need, a decline in care, something that they need some short-term rehab, it will be convenient to just go to the top of the hill, get your skilled care for the minimum amount of time, and hopefully get them to return back to their neighborhood. So,
Do you have any idea in this, I don't want to, like, kind of what's the cost if you're in there for that type of
we're
guy?
still working on some of the financing. We've not received all the numbers back yet from the construction company. It will be a rental, and it could be an option for them to put some money down and try to get that a little bit lower rental rate. But it won't be an ownership type thing. The community will own, St. Andrews will own the patio home, so.
Will they need to have a minimum dollar amount of assets in order to, rent?
Again, we're still kind of going through some of the financing, so it's not been determined just yet, so.
Is that neighborhood meant to be, driven or walked?
This is, so there's parking lots all around, but it's really meant to be walked. We're really kind of going after the active senior that's retired. Again, just wants to kind of downsize a little bit and not have to worry about the upkeep of their home and that, so.
You want to do the technical side, do you have like stats and stuff like that they're addressing on that? I'm sorry, I didn't grab them, I was curious.
Good evening, Mayor Flower, members of the board. My name is Paul Boyer. I'm a civil engineering design consultant, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. We're excited to be here. It's been a long time coming. We're here for two reasons. One, we're requesting to rezone the property in R5C. Currently it has a dual zoning to R5 and R1. The R5, I believe, is a carryover from St. Louis County, but it's not recognized in the municipal code. Discussions with staff said to clean up the zoning for the property, we would rezone the property to all the R5C. And then we're requesting site plan approval. I'll give a brief overview of this property, the neighboring properties, and then I'd like to give a quick history of what's transpired, bring us here tonight, and then talk about the proposed development. I'll try to not to repeat what Brad's talked about, and then be happy to answer the questions. So the property itself is 23.6 acres. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but the existing facility sits on the top of the hill. There's 3 watersheds. With north being up, there's a watershed that falls to the southeast, one that falls to the southwest, and there's a smaller area that drains to the north. It falls approximately 100 feet, to give you an idea, from the building to the southeast corner. If you were to draw a line south, it falls about 70 feet from the building to the south property line. So there's quite a bit of fall on the property. To the south is Ennebush Estates, and zone R3 with the CUP. Hilltop Village is to the west, which is also zone R3 with the CUP, and then Forby Estates is to the north, that's R5B, and then we have R5B zoning over here. So a quick history of this development. St. Andrews started this started planning for this actually in 2016. They commissioned a market study in 2017. And the market study determined that within this area, there was a need for more independent living facilities, and that need would continue to grow over the next several years. In the first quarter of this year, they brought in focus groups, and they asked individuals the type of communities that they would be interested in, and they indicated that they wanted more senior housing options for independent living. Typically, you will see the big box apartment style buildings, and the focus groups indicated that people wanted more interaction with their community members, more activities. St. Andrews landed on the pocket neighborhood style, and as Brad indicated, the difference between this and what you would typically expect for independent senior living, these buildings are clustered around common ground areas, and those common ground areas are places for activities, as he mentioned, bocce ball, pickleball. You could do gazebos, fire pits, and it promotes really activity. Also maintains privacy for the residents, but also allows them to interact if they want to with their neighbors. So once they landed on the pocket model, we had put a site plan together, had a preliminary meeting with the city. Following that meeting, St. Andrews reached out to Enterbush Estates, the residents to the south would be most impacted, and they invited them to a meeting so we could present this development to them, get their feedback. That first meeting was on August 1st. We had a lot of participation from the residents, got a lot of feedback, went back to the design board, revised the plan accordingly, and re-presented the plan to them on September 10th. So we had meetings with the overall residents. I think St. Andrews sent out invitations to over 40 people, the ones that be most immediately impacted. And following that meeting, we had 4 individual meetings with specific neighbors that had specific concerns. So we walked the site with them, along with the landscape architect as well, just to try to address their concerns more or less one-on-one. But following those meetings, we filed our application. So that's what's transpired to bring us here tonight. So the overall development itself, as Brad indicated, there's 24 buildings with 4 units in each building, total of 96 units, 1,000 square foot each with the open floor plan. These buildings are centered around common ground areas or neighborhoods. These buildings are spaced no closer than 50 feet apart, basically from face of building to face of building, and 30 feet from side to side. The porches are roughly 15 feet apart, centered around the development. As I already mentioned, there's activities planned within these areas. It is a pedestrian-oriented community, so all these slopes, actually all the common ground areas between these villas are basically at 0 grade. So everything is at 0%, so there's no slopes within here. You're able to transition between the clusters of villas with this serpentine walk at a maximum of 5% slope. So you're able to access all points of the site with an ADA accessible walk. And as Brad mentioned, we'll have other activities, but we'll also have a senior exercise route with senior-friendly equipment located at stations along the route as well. The residence itself, as Brad mentioned, these are rental units. They'll be typically would be a buy-in fee associated with these. The clubhouse, which is located here, we have a multi-purpose room, offer dining facilities, like an exercise room for the residents as well. Basically, we're trying to encourage them to stay on site, interact with the community members, and provide services for them. Let me touch on parking as well. So parking, we have 129 surface parking stalls clustered around the site. They're conveniently located along clusters of buildings for each of those. We do not have garages, so there are senior independent living developments where you'll see there can be residential style buildings with garages, but they're lined along the street, so it's less community driven. This is really one of the more community-driven models. So we have 129 stalls, and we have 12 garage stalls for a total of 141. The municipal code for Eureka does not have an ordinance requirement for senior living. Senior living in most municipalities is recognized as having a different parking requirement than standard single family. So The closest that Eureka has is single family, which is 2 vehicles per dwelling unit. That would be over parking this facility. We're parking 141 stalls for 96 units. That's 1.5 stalls per unit. Just to give you, for example, independent living in St. Louis County parks at 3/4 of a stall per independent living unit. We're doing a project in Sunset Hills right now. Sunset Hills parks at 1/2 a stall per unit, plus 1 stall for every 10 units for visitor parking, and then 1 space for every 2 employees. Based on that model, they would have 60 stalls on this. They have 60 stalls required for this development. St. Louis County would have 72 stalls for this development. We're doing a senior living currently in Chesterfield. Chesterfield has the highest requirement, which is 1 stall per independent living unit. So that would be 96 stalls. Again, we're at 141. So we're very comfortable with the amount of stalls we have for this development. I'd like to touch on some of the discussion items or concerns that some of the residents had for this facility. I'll just run through them in no particular order. The main one, or one of the main ones, is stormwater. As I mentioned, there's 2 watersheds. Our development encompasses the 2 south watersheds. So we have 2 detention basins. We have a wet basin here and a dry basin at the southwest corner. This basin will be a permanent pond. We'll have storage that occurs above that. I've had numerous discussions with the residents. I understand their concerns, and also with city staff, especially after this year. There's been a tremendous amount of runoff that's occurred. With the fall on this site, I know the residents in Edwards Estates really are feeling the brunt of it as far as this water running off on site. Just a quick methodology. Basically, everything north of our development limits, the road, the buildings themselves, all that is going to be captured in inlets and conveyed to this detention basin. So basically, the tributary area is roughly the middle of the site this way, is tributary to this basin. I size this basin, I size this basin conservatively. Not to get in the weeds, but the way we address sizing these basins, we look at the existing runoff release rate for these developments. And then we make sure that the proposed release rate after this is developed is the same or less than the current release rate. I went a step further and looked at this development as if it was completely in there and established the completely undeveloped release rate. And then we designed this space, or over-designed this basin to actually reduce the release rate below what currently exists. And to give you an example, for the 100-year storm, we're seeing almost a 30% reduction in the runoff release rate for the storm. So we're trying to be overly conservative as far as addressing stormwater, because I've heard it time and time again, and I've told the residents in our meetings, I don't want to get a phone call, after this development is done, indicating they're having stormwater issues. We've done the same thing with the west basin. Now that's a dry basin. They use the same methodology, establish the existing runoff release rate, assuming the site is undeveloped. And so that is a minimal release rate. And then we design the basin to release water at a rate that is actually less than the undeveloped condition. Again, we're near 30% on the 100-year storm as far as reduction of stormwater release rate. So we feel that we've done a very good job in mitigating the stormwater runoff. And again, these residents currently are feeling the brunt of this hillside coming down into their rear yards. That water is coming down uninterrupted and running through their backyards, then running to the low point. Again, we're going to intercept everything that's north of our curb line and in our building area. All that's going to be captured, directed to the basin, and then released. One of the next biggest issues was the buffer. We have expanded the buffer from our initial meeting with the residents. We did that by moving some villas. We moved 3 villas over there and relocated the clubhouse, but we expanded the buffer as well. As I mentioned, we walked the site with some of the residents that will be most impacted by the buffer with our landscape architect. We are going to, in the areas specifically at this corner here, the areas where we're impacting the buffer the most, we're going to go in with juniper and spruce trees, evergreen trees to buffer those areas and provide, increase that buffer area to a minimum of 35 to 40 feet. And then what we're also going to do, because there's some sparse areas in between the buffer area, We're gonna do selective infill of the existing buffers with some larger trees, but mostly smaller flowering trees, planting those and filling in gaps in the existing buffer as well. So we're, again, I understand that the Annabush Estates, they want that buffer. We also want that buffer to be maintained. So I think in working together, I think we've come up with a good solution for that. Lighting was another concern, but not as big as the first two, but we'll have, obviously have lighting, parking lot lights, and then again, this is intended to be safe, but an intimate type of development. We will have some light standards along the walking paths, but the majority of those lights will be low bollard style lights. We'll have shields on the lights and use low light standards. Obviously, we don't want it, there won't be any light spread beyond the immediate facility, but certainly will not be going across property lines. Entrance improved, our entrance, we've widened the entrance considerably, and there was discussions on that. The existing entrance really is not exactly safe. The existing, there's 2 stone columns there at 16.5 feet wide. We've widened this entrance to over 30 feet, have run turning movements, and what we did is we squared off the entrance where it approaches onto Forbury Road. So a vehicle pulling and getting ready to exit the facility can easily look northbound and southbound on Forbury Road, where currently they exit almost diagonally out of the facility, and they have a very awkward movement where they're looking over their shoulder. I did just a conceptual exhibit. I apologize, I only did one, but if you want to pass that down, that gives a better idea of kind of, we will have a stop sign at the entrance as far as what is proposed, but what I'm passing down is basically shows a vehicle exiting, their positioning at the egress point, and then also shows another vehicle turning in, so it shows that they easily make it. Also run tractor trailer movements coming into this facility, easily handles it.
So basically, if you're parked there, like you're saying, it's almost like you have a platform where you can, like, so you can platform out a car, it can be sitting.
Exactly.
It may not be, you may not be able to do 10 of them, but you can do one car sitting there square, more like like a 90 intersection.
Right, and then it shows that on that exhibit, that's exactly.
And you're saying, just clarification to all the stone walls, all that monument, all that
Go away.
stuff comes away, and then so you're doubling the size of the width of the pavement there, which is 16, which is almost like, it's less than a driveway.
We pulled it out, so again, it currently just runs diagonally out into the roadway. It's a very unsafe condition where a driver exiting would be basically looking behind them at cars coming southbound on Forbury Road. So what we did is we approached it, turned 90 degrees and came in. One thing I want to mention, as far as this entrance location really is fixed at this site climbs significantly as this goes up. So this road falls off and the site climbs dramatically. So as far as moving an entrance somewhere else along Forbury Road is not feasible. So I mean, the current entrance is in the right spot. It's just configured very poorly. I also want to touch on traffic. So traffic seems to have been a concern. I touched on it a little bit with the parking requirement. I guess I'll rely on several things. One, we've done countless senior living facilities in multiple municipalities throughout St. Louis County. I mean, we're doing numerous facilities currently. We typically don't have to do traffic studies for these type of facilities. It's just recognized that these are low traffic generators. But knowing that the concerns had come up, we did do some research. The Institute of Transportation Engineers had done a study on senior living development, traffic generation for senior living development. We're kind of the Bible for traffic engineering. And they determined for this type of facility, we actually have, I don't think we have enough. But we had a summary kind of that study. But I'll bullet point it for you. Basically, the summary of that study was for senior living developments, especially independent living developments, they have roughly 2/3 of the average daily traffic that you would typically see for a single family residence. However, their traffic flow is different. They have, don't get lost in the weeds, but they have 20 to 30% of the traffic volume that you would see at the peak hourly flow. So typically you're going to see your peak hourly traffic between 7:30 and 9, let's say, in the morning, and then you'll have your peaks again in between 4 and 6 at night. So the majority of single-family residents, they're either leaving for work, coming back from work, picking up kids, taking kids to practice and so forth. What they found in independent senior living facilities, these people are retired. They're not driving back and forth to work. They don't travel in the peak time. So 20 to 30% of what would be anticipated for the traffic volume is 20 to 30% what would be anticipated for a single family resident as far as trips generated. So let's transfer that to numbers. So for this type of development at peak morning hour, you would have 27 vehicles leaving this facility in peak morning hour based on those traffic studies. In the evening, you would have 29 vehicles either coming or going, 29 trips from this development at the peak hours. So basically what it indicates is people in this development do not travel typically during the peak hours, recognizing that the roads are busy at that time, and they don't have the same needs as a typical single family does. In addition to that study cited was basically, it was for age groups starting at 55 years of age. The minimum age here, apologize, I'll correct Brad, so the minimum age here is 62, not 65, so the residents here would be 62 years old.
Did you just say that the study was for people 55 and older?
The study started with 55.
And you're saying that out here, people over the age of 55 don't do rush hour? That's
No.
what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I think what he's saying is, what the information on the sheet says, is he's saying the trips are for a group that was 55 plus.
Yeah.
So he's saying that's conservative if you're saying it's 65 as his base group, because they're gonna drive just
Right,
generally
but
less than 55.
I'm suggesting that that does not apply to this area, because that's not.
Well, then why don't we let him-
Calm down, attorney.
Well, let's not for you to decide. So the age limit on this is 62. What the study says is the older residents get, the less they drive. Okay, so when people move into this facility, they're downsizing, and they're recognizing that. In addition to that, this facility is de-emphasizing cars. This is a pedestrian facility. These are independent living units do not have garages attached to them. What this facility is promoting is basically they're gonna have hospitality cars. So if a resident doesn't have a car and they want to go somewhere, they would have a car on site that they would call, and they would be able to basically not rent, but that car would be available for them to take out if they want it. There'll be ride sharing, share vans. So the same thing, everything cited in that study said all those metrics, as those are added on, the traffic volume goes down. So I think the tendency is for people to look at these through the lens of their own life and say, I have 2 cars, I have 3 cars, I don't see downsizing. That's not the case with this development. I'm citing, that study basically cited a number of other studies. There's they got their information from, there's trip and generation manuals, there's data from other consultants, they got it from the DOT, as well as other developments within the area. And that study was cited by subsequent studies as being accurate within a margin of error to what they found across the country. So basically, the traffic generation from these type of facilities in summary is considerably less than a single family development. Again, I think the important note is, typically what you would expect to see out of here in the peak morning and peak evening would be 27 to 29 vehicles per hour during the peak times. Basically, that's my presentation in summary. St. Andrews has seen a need for additional independent living within the area. They've come up on a unique model. They have a huge investment. This is a $21.5 million investment that they were putting into this facility. And we're excited to bring it to Eureka. And I think it'd be a good resource for Eureka, allow seniors to age in place.
One of the things you're asking for is a variance on the parking. You talked about the fact that other places have different codes, but did you think about amending our code rather than just saying you don't want to comply with what the terms are?
We had discussions with staff, and they just said we would just need to ask for an exception.
Okay, what are the grounds for your exception? Because in order for the board to grant an exception, there has to be something unusual about this lot. And since you're planning it from the start, how do you justify that there's something unusual about this lot that would warrant a variance from the code?
Well, your code doesn't address parking for senior living. So
I understand that.
I think that's what he's saying, the exception though, it's a different use than what the RFC. Well, then we ought to, if we advise somebody to come in on a parking, let's say from our own staff, this is what you need in a quarter, and I mean, that's what I say, if our parking needs to be adjusted, we as a city ought to adjust that.
Well, the
I've
problem-
seen that before.
And the problem is that this is a zoning classification that carries with it certain requirements. Whatever we do for one, we do for all. And in order to vary from the code, there has to be some
I've seen us,
unusual
I've
type of
seen over the
variance.
years, all sorts of different parking variances on shopping centers to archives, I mean, the parking, our code's much less specific than what others are. And we've had people come in all the time on, I mean, accepting the plan. But I agree, I would agree with your general point, I think it's weird, the point I thought was interesting is when you go through, because it's very deceptive when you do it, you go through and you say, okay, I'm at 2, but you know, the Chesterfield would be the most high one, actually has a requirement for senior living, that's at 1. So they go through and they categorize these parkings, and that's an issue for us and all sorts of stuff, because we throw the parking around, we don't really have very good parking ordinance, period. So it's
Yeah,
very
real-
confusing, because it's always like people asking for exceptions, and we don't have any categories of it at all, so it would make sense for us to perhaps.
Well, if you are gonna look at, I mean, there would be independent, there would be assisted living, skilled nursing, as Brad said, what the current facility is, but when I'm citing you, again, we've done numerous one of these, and I'm just off my head, and I researched it before I came here, we're doing Chesterfield right now, and Sunset Hills, and I cited those parking requirements to you, again, the Sunset Hills would be basically 60 stalls for this development, Chesterfield would be 96. Unincorporated St. Louis County would be 72, so again, we're at 141.
I have some questions for you. So just out of curiosity, on Schedule B, on the title exception notes, it was mentioned several times that there are conditions and restrictions on the property title that's not necessarily in regards to, say, zoning of this property. What kind of restrictions and conditions were they, just off the top of your head?
Those could be anything as far as from you're catching me cold, I haven't looked at that survey in a while, but those could be anything from easement restrictions. We have some easements that are gonna be vacating through the property, there's some utilities running through the property, so we're gonna be vacating and rerunning those as well, but specifically, I would have to go back for some.
Okay. And also, I think at the P and Z meeting, it was mentioned a concrete swale was mentioned. And where would that be on the property?
The concrete swale.
As in the minute notes, or the notes from the P and Z?
I don't recall that.
No,
I remember reading about it.
you do?
I do.
Do you have a swell going into one of the basins or something like that?
No.
Do you have a concrete swell of any kind?
No.
Okay. And then I know that, SS on the dotted lines down there was sanitary sewer coming from,
Yes.
in the bush. What is ST?
Storm.
Okay, that's what I was, okay. How many feet do you need to build up the detention basin on the southwest, corner of the backside? Is it the southwest corner down there?
That's the southwest, so it's approximately, I think I have a 10-foot deep basin, the water is gonna pond, I don't know the routing by heart, but it's gonna pond roughly 7.5 feet. And then we have, the way we model these is we assume that what happens if the inlet gets blocked, the orifice gets blocked, and then you run to the next orifice opening, so there's a safety factor in this basin. So we're required to have 1 foot freeboard above the maximum ponding elevation, assuming that the low flow orifice is blocked, if that makes any sense. But anyway, so the basin's roughly 10 feet deep, water's gonna pond under 7 feet or so.
Okay, so the current elevation of the backside of that touches, in the bush back there, how far do you have to build that up? I'm talking of the detention basin.
This?
Yes,
The dry one? You talking about the dry one?
yeah, the dry one. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I know it's gonna be 10 foot deep, but are you digging out 10 feet or are you building up from the current elevation?
We're actually doing both. So we're cutting into the slope and then we're gonna push the slope out. That's what you're seeing here. We're gonna push the slope out. We're gonna dig into the slope and push the slope out. So we're maintaining 3-to-1 slopes, 3 feet horizontal to 1 foot vertical fall. And so that's basically considered a safe, maintainable slope. So maintaining those slopes, that's the grading that you see. So we're actually doing a combination. So we're not just throwing dirt out and putting a base on the side of it. We're actually digging into the slope and then pushing the hillside out.
Okay, So just out of curiosity, if say that were to fail or the other one would fail during, say, a heavy storm event, whatnot, we all know, our levee over here had, ended up having a hole, and I'm sure that over time that occurred, but what sort of, impact do you feel that would have on the properties then behind there?
If this basin was over top, which I don't think it would be, it would run down, the outfall running down through this, it would go into the next basin downstream. This basin discharges into a dry swale, which ultimately is picked up in a large culvert that runs through these properties and ultimately goes to the second Ambush Estates basin, just right here.
So that one releases to the swale that goes between the
There's
properties?
an existing swale that runs through the property, so we're discharging back from the property line. The water's gonna overland flow, and then there's a flared end section on this property here. It'll pick up that water, and then it'll be piped, ultimately makes it goes to the second Ambush Estates basin downstream.
Underground?
They have another basin and
Yeah,
then
it's piped underground, but they have an underground basin.
But the issue is all the water in the whole site goes into those two basins.
It does.
So it's not, you're not putting new water in the basin, you're actually slowing down water, you know what I mean? The water that's here has to go somewhere. So it's not like the only time you, like in your situation, if I would, hey, we had failure, you basically get back to what you have now.
Well, I think the grading changes some of that.
That's what the detention basins change too. They hold it. So you're still not, I mean, if you plan for a collapse, the whole thing, the whole system falls apart, yeah, we shouldn't build anything. You know what I mean? So you gotta assume some of it.
I mean, the city has standards, cities adopted basically MSD standards, so we designed the MSD standards. These basins have been oversized, but MSD standards stop at the 100-year storm. So
Yeah, that's the minimum, but, and then where does that one release?
this one releases, we have an outfall roughly 50 feet off the property line, and then there's I think there's like a dry bed that runs through here, so it's gonna come across through here and ultimately end up in the Ambush Estates subdivision. That basin.
Okay. Let's see. And then that one's 10 foot deep. How deep is that one then?
Well, this is a wet, so it's a permanent lake, so we'll have, the permanent pool elevation, we'll try to maintain a minimum of 10 feet of water in there, which minimizes algae, still allows for fish. So the storage would occur above that storage, I have roughly, I don't know, like 6 feet or so of storage above the normal pool elevation. And the way this is actually dual purpose, this wet lake, so it's actually a wetlands area, and it also is a stormwater detention. So it provides water quality and detention. So it'll have a aquatic bench or buffer. So we have basically a 12-foot flat area. So it's gonna have a safety bench. So it's not a pond that you just go 3-to-1 slope down into the water. It'll have a safety bench. I think the safety bench is 6 or 7 feet, that's almost flat before the water. And then there's an aquatic bench. So the total distance is 12 feet, where you have a safety bench and then an aquatic bench that's almost flat. And that'll have plantings on it for wetland areas. And then the water drops off after that at a 3-to-1 slope all the way down. So this is a dual purpose basin as far as water quality and detention.
Now, is there an existing pond on the property?
There's not.
Okay. So as far as that being created, is that just simply for aesthetics, as far as like
No,
keeping wet? Or-
Yeah, well, the wet portion it's gonna be a feature for the residents. It'll have a fountain in it. So we have the walking path around it. It'll be a feature for the residents. They can fish out of it. But its purpose is function.
So there will be a fountain in there.
There will
Is
be.
it large enough to keep the water like moving throughout the whole,
The fountain.
okay, so reduce
Yeah.
mosquito larvae and whatnot?
Right.
Right.
As far as erosion going into the lake, is that they maintain?
Well, once the site's stabilized, there should be erosion. The site's gonna be, there'll be a maintenance staff on site, all the paved areas, any place where people are walking is gonna be paved as far as the accessible routes. The rest will be heavily vegetated. So once it's built, there shouldn't be
But in the lake, or the permanent location there, is it going to fill in with soil or anything?
No, we have a forebay, so this forebay, the way these are designed, so the water goes into the forebay, and then from the forebay into the wetland. The purpose of the forebay, actually, so that's a good question, the purpose of the forebay is for the silt to fall out before it goes into the lake. And the forebay can be maintained, so that can be cleaned out.
That's always the main.
Right, yes. Yes.
Is that what the responsibility is?
St. Andrews. Yeah.
I have a question about the buffer area. Are you taking out a lot of, or any of the mature trees that are there now?
Yes, we are.
Is there a way that you can not do that?
Well, we're within our buffer, within our, so our limits, just to give you an idea, if you can see it okay, where the bright color is basically the limits of our.
Why don't you show them the other drawing, because there's buffers on it, just trees.
Yeah, but trees are different than mature trees. We had this issue when they put in the, others.
Yeah, so what's in
They kept the mature trees.
the buffer area limits on this are dark green. So what's above that is gonna be clear. So that will.
Right, so the green that's there, those are new trees or?
No, that's existing.
That's what I was asking, okay. That's.
So you're basically saying, though, in the areas you're showing units and the clearing, everything goes, but then the dark green is the all trees stay.
What's there now? It's not
And
just
then we're
we're
gonna-
not
not just-
planting, seeds.
No, it's existing
And
stuff.
then
That's my question.
we're gonna do two things. One, we're gonna supplement the existing buffer with understory trees. And then we're also gonna, areas where we've cleared, we're gonna go back in with additional plantings.
Yes, that's fine, thank you. What's the speed limit on Corby Road?
I think it's 20 or 25.
30,
Golf
Is it
carts?
30?
30 on Forby, yeah, 20 on Source Street.
Thank
Golf
you.
carts to nowhere though. McDonald thing is McDonald.
So if say something were to happen, I guess a resident had asked me, if, say, the detention basin toward the backside of the property, say, were to fail, is there some sort of, escrow or something that we could have, like, as an emergency, like require that they keep, in case?
Well, during construction, they have an escrow of improvements that are out to be put up, and then that usually gets and that'll take them a couple of years to get done, the city put it out, and then there's usually, you got quite a bit of time to establish, so control, get the grass on it. But there is a point where it's done, and they'd be covered by their own insurance, and if they have a breach, there's a cause, in this case, you got a cause of action to an existing business that makes money, which would be a lot better than, like, a lot of them are just HOAs and stuff that are not gonna have a lot of funding, so this is to me, times, because you guys are targeted to build their property, so make money.
Right.
They got a reason to make sure the business works.
Got it.
But for the short term, to me, the most dangerous period is during construction, because it's mud, you got all sorts of, you've got a lot of additional debris that goes in, so we do escrow after every time, which is the most critical period. We don't release them until we're satisfied that it's all operational and dug out, and they're all, like, they'll actually go in and they'll have to provide us as-bills that show that the bottoms of those basins are the right depth, that they've done everything, they walk and establish it, and we make sure it operates after the place is finished.
Okay, so my, I was looking at this here, and the existing building is 47,524 square feet. And then the proposed new buildings, it's gonna be 77,250. So the new building's total square footage is gonna be almost twice as big as the existing building that's already there. So when you say that you reduce the stormwater runoff 30% of the existing, that doesn't take into the account that, you know, the concrete and the buildings, et cetera, it's going to add more runoff, right?
No, yeah, no, that's how we size them.
The sewers now.
Right.
Instead of running off of the sewers, that's gonna catch water.
Right, they're gonna catch them, right, but
Yeah, so
So-
then so it's a detailed study, what we do,
Okay.
we literally count every, just like you counted, we do every bit of impervious area that's on the site. And then we size these basins based on the contributing impervious area. And that basin volume and the outfall structure and the openings in the outfall structure. So as that water is, obviously when you pave something, then you're gonna have more runoff from that. So what the purpose of these basins basically is to hold and contain that water so that people downstream don't see any difference whatsoever. So all these impervious areas are gonna be collected and run into this basin. What's gonna happen is that water's gonna fill up in that basin, and that's gonna be slowly released with people downstream see the same runoff release rate that they've always seen.
But in this case, didn't you say you actually did assumptions that are outside the norm? You
But
didn't, you
outside-
assumed no structures that run there. You didn't take the trade-offs on the detention.
Right, yeah, we could have normally, standard practice would be I would take all the credit I could for all the existing impervious area on site.
For the baseline, he said, this is how much leaves right now, and I don't have to make it any better than that. And he took those assumptions out. So when you say it's the minimum, it's not. He took an assumption out and said, I could have had a credit for existing pervious stuff. And I said, I'm not gonna take it. I'll start at 0. So that's why his sizing, while it still hits the 100, he really did it as an apples where he didn't go through and try it, which is something the city requested. So the whole goal is he's gotta say, whatever leaves there now, no more can leave any fast. It can't come out any faster. But he's actually gone a little bit on that piece a little bit better. Now, the other part on that, just because we talked about it heavily at staff, is the basin that's over on the far side was not on the original plan. And one of my contentions, and one of the things I thought was most critical on this development was, I wanted the existing building that's at there has no detention. So there's no detention for the existing facility at St. Andrews, which is all above there. While there's no detention on the bottom half, that is grass, it's a little light, it's got some absorption, but you have a lot of pavement, impervious surface up there, or impervious. So that's why we'd ask for a true detention basin on that left side that you're drawing, which in my opinion is the type of thing the board and the city should be going after. So we've got a basin down there that's sized for better than what the release rate needs. And then we got an additional one that actually takes an existing condition that isn't good now and dramatically improves an existing condition. We didn't just say, don't worry about the old one, don't put a detention in. We asked you to do that, you did it. And don't you have underground detention on the other side too?
No, we don't.
You got that just something out. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying is and that's why I wanted to reiterate that to the guys in St. Andrews. These are not, I mean, these are big, what the city is not trying to keep it the same. The city's asked them to dramatically improve the detention, not do the same thing. So you should see much slower water, the same amount of water will leave the site, it comes out of the sky, but it should get to you a lot slower. And it's a huge improvement engineering wise over what's there. And it'll be guaranteed with escrow funds on that. So I can't answer, every other item, but that one is, there's no doubt that this is a significant improvement over existing condition, in my opinion.
I think there was a comment made by our building commissioner that this development has over 10,000 cubic feet of additional water detention that above and beyond what they would normally be required to have.
Right, and that's what I'm saying to you guys out there from our end. I don't want you to get the feeling like, hey, I like every development that comes in or whatever. I mean, we really pounded on them and said, hey, this is an existing condition over the top, but I actually am very happy with the way they came back and did this because I never got to find out anybody. And we asked for these, they came in, interacted, and we went at this stuff. And I think this is the way for us as the cities to try and figure out how to get new projects that are over detained, but to fix existing conditions. And I mean, again, if you look around the city and newer projects with bigger detention basins, I mean, and those are sized different than underbushes with the new standards. I mean, our goal is to make the place better, not to leave you guys in a situation that's worse. So that's just for what it's worth.
I know, Underbush has some issues with their entrance coming into, North Street with the trees along North Street. Are you guys aware of that, and are you guys going to address that issue?
I think, we'll have to talk to the trustees, but the fact is that with more traffic, it becomes, you have to inch out further on Underbush to ensure that you're not going to get. I think it probably needs to be addressed. I'm not sure. Something's got to happen with probably the city and Underbush with the amount of traffic to determine even if those pillars have, I would say even if the pillars have to go because if you can't see, there's more traffic coming, you're not going to be able to make turns. there'll be more traffic.
But that was one of my comments about understanding that is the entrance, I think they've done here, just physically going over there. I think it'll be an improvement once they're based on traffic, but I was very concerned when I left your guys' subdivision, because the biggest single traffic improvement for Underbush, I mean, if you did that new, you would not be able to put those big, the landscape in the front door, those big monuments, because you cannot see around it like a right or a left, and I think the city would be real interested in sitting down and talking to you guys about how to make that. That would have a bigger improvement on your subdivision safety and traffic than anything we're talking about right here, because that is dangerous.
But, I mean, that's part of my concern is not just Underbush, and it's why I asked for an assessment, because we've got villas going in across the street, 18 of them, in that road. All that stuff needs to be analyzed, so we can ensure we've got driveways that are closer than they probably should be for a local road. And that stuff should be looked at so that we can determine where signs should be, where stop signs should be. And I did talk to a traffic engineer, and they said that she said she would recommend an assessment. But, I mean, I told her I was a resident, and my thought process is probably that whole corridor needs to be looked at to make sure. But I did identify that we do have an issue, because most people say coming out of our subdivisions, you have to go almost into a traffic lane.
You would not, your subdivision would not meet any modern standards for site distance in front, it would be, you'd have to take it down, so.
Yeah.
I gotta get back to this next one, so what else you got on there?
That's it.
Does the board have any other question?
Where will the employees park?
So we display some of the parking for the skilled nursing facility, so that lot is there for the skilled nursing facility. So they have their parking here and their parking there.
How long is this project gonna take?
Anticipate 18 months.
Anybody else on board got any questions? All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so we are into the bill section of what we do here. All right, now again, board can discuss whatever, but we need to have a motion. So we've got bill number 2632 regarding what we just, with the proposed R5C rezoning at 304B. So we need to have that, that would be what we just obviously did the presentation on. So I need to have a motion of some kind, and then
So I'll make a motion to read bill number 2632 for the first time.
I'll second.
Okay, and just so we're cleared up, is there any other further discussion on that the board has? All right, so. A motion and a second, all in favor?
All right.
Anybody opposed?
An ordinance rezoning approximately 23.62 acres at 300 Corby Road from R1 and R5 to R5C multifamily residential.
Motion for a second.
I'll make a motion to read Bill 2632 for the second time by short title.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
All right.
An ordinance rezoning approximately 23.62 acres at 300 Corby Road from R1 and R5 to R5C multifamily residential.
I'll make a motion to read Bill 2632 for the third time by short title.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to read it for the third time, all in favor?
All right.
Anybody opposed?
An ordinance rezoning approximately 23.62 acres at 300 Corby Road from R1 and R5 to R5C multifamily residential.
All right,
I'm moving to adopt bill number 2632 by roll call.
Second.
go ahead, Joe.
Okay, Alderman Barry,
Yes.
Alderman Stern,
Yes.
Alderman Kiefer,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
yes, Crazy, and Holly.
Yes.
All right. Bill, all right, bill number 2632, bear ordinance number 2518. All right, we are on to authorizing the banking depository services.
It's the one that
We put that,
rip it out.
you don't want us to do that, right? The depository. So, right, depository services. All right, we have,
Yeah, I make a motion to read bill number 26, 33, first time by short time.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
In order to authorize entering into an agreement for the provision of banking depository services.
Make a motion to read bill number 2633. Second time by short time.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
In order to authorize entering into an agreement for the provision of banking depository services.
I make a motion to read bill number 2633 for the first time by short time.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
In order to authorize entering into an agreement for the provision of banking depository services.
I make a motion that we adopt Bill 2633 into ordinance by roll call vote.
Alderman Merrick,
Yes.
Sir,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Murray. Yes. Escresi. Yes. Howard.
Yes.
All right, bill number 2633 will bear ordinance number 2519. Before we get into 9, Bob, I think had a comment on, he was wanting to discuss for a second on what to do on amending board boundaries. Like he was wanting to take just.
Yeah, I wanted to, do something more.
That's what he wanted to do.
As a moving table.
Yeah, you want to just table it? I'm gonna table it, we'll talk about it. You got a motion in a second, but I was basically asking this courtesy to discuss it.
Yeah.
So is that a motion? Motion to table, is the other second?
Question, how long are we gonna table this thing for? Because how soon do we?
No more than one, I wouldn't have minded just doing it one more meeting.
Okay, I was just concerned about the April election having, have all that done to the county.
I think we can do relatively quickly. I have some ideas.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
But yeah, I totally understand. We have a motion and a second.
I'll second it, yeah.
Is anybody, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? That passes. All right, we have the radio system. I can do the same.
Bill number 2634.
Yeah, 2635.
35 or 34?
We skipped, I asked.
Oh,
He's still mad at me and Barry, so we're going to.
So I make a motion to read bill number 2635 by short time.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
An ordinance authorizing entering into subscription radio system agreement with St. Louis County.
I make a motion to read bill number 2635 and second time by short time.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Anybody opposed?
An ordinance authorizing entering into a subscriber radio system agreement with St. Louis County.
I'm reading bill number 2635 for the third time by short time.
Second.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
An ordinance authorizing entering into a subscriber radio system agreement with St. Louis County.
I make a motion to read bill number 2635 for the second time.
Roll call vote.
All roll call vote. Motion to approve. Roll call.
We got a second, anyone?
Alderman,
Yeah.
Alderman Merrick.
Yes.
That's just their names.
I know,
You call some
I
people
messed
Alderman,
up.
you call some people their
It's the
first
proper
names.
way to address them, it's fine. Sir,
Yes.
Kiefer, Murray,
Yes.
Escresi. Yes. Howard.
Yes.
Alright, so all right, we had the last one, I'd be more than happy to give you guys a quick summary of that going on.
What's the ordinance number?
2636.
2520.
2520, so 2635 bears, 25.
20. That's the ordinance number.
Yeah, ordinance number 25. So the next one's 2636. For the creek debris removal.
I make a motion to read bill number 2636 for by short
Okay,
time.
well, that's what I had to do on the lines, so
Yeah, so give a motion, second read, once in discussion.
I'll do it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
An ordinance to authorize entering into an agreement with the Rockwood School District for creek debris removal services.
Okay, so yes, if we could, if you can give an explanation for the people who may be watching, you know, the millions of people out there. Your fans, yeah.
So the creek debris removal for the 8th, everyone's excited. So the, basically
Say.
the creek debris removal agreement was that we were able to, during the process of our overall creek cleaning, we identified a project with Rockwood School District. And we basically contracted to do the work, but they paid us outside of our city. So it doesn't cost the city anything, but it was something we were able to do in conjunction with our other cleanup work since we were there. And it, I think it improved the drainage coming into one of our, to our Clifty Creek, Forby Creek area. And it also, I think it'll be a big improvement to Rockwood, and they were very appreciative that we were able to kind of work it all out. So it's basically just allowing us to get reimbursed.
So even though it went through their property, they are paying us.
Okay, it was a private, we were able to speed it through, but we just coordinated with the private guy.
But also having the people on staff, there was no mobilization cost, so we actually saved both tax and jurisdictions money.
Yeah, and they were pretty typical, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's an official. So if,
I'll make a motion to rebuild 2636 for the second time by short title.
Second.
all those in favor? Anybody opposed?
An ordinance to authorize entering into an agreement with the Rockwood School District for creek debris removal services.
I make a motion to read November 2636 for the third time by short time.
Second.
All those in favor? Anybody opposed?
An ordinance to authorize entering into an agreement with the Rockwood School District for creek debris removal services.
I move we adopt November 2636 by roll call vote.
Second.
Alderman Berry.
Yes.
Stern.
Yes.
Kiefer.
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
Escrezi.
Yes.
Alderman.
Yes.
Bill number 2636 will bear ordinance number 2521. So we got bills for approval. Anybody have any questions on anything?
There are no additions or deletions. I move that we pass the bills.
Second.
All those in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes, you're gonna pay bills. Anybody on recurring bills?
No, I make a motion. Return bill.
Is that correction?
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second to pay the bills. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. And basically, again, for the public, that we have to approve before all the bills, so we get a list of them, we go through them, we review them before, and then we approve them by the vote. All right, we're gonna now receive the financial statements. Anybody have any questions on those?
No, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the financial statements.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, now we're into the mayoral, alderman, and staff counts and reports. Do you want to go?
On the board thing.
Alderman Perry, I'm sorry.
We want to discuss the work situation as far as options. I look at it in terms of trying to correct a situation where we have one ward that is substantially short of what it should be compared to the other 2 yards. And to correct the situation, we can either adjust the 3 wards to make them more fair, or what I would think would be an even better situation, because of the size of the city, being at least 5 square miles, is to create another one. And what I looked at was taking kind of the boundaries from Windswept along the road there, picking up all the houses outside the Legends, basically, and Shaw's Garden, and going up to the railroad tracks as Ward 2. And then on the north side, changing it where it runs out just on the boundaries of Hilltop to the west for about Ward 4, and to the east side, Ward 1. So basically,
Basically, but what you're saying is, if I'm understanding, right, is you want to look at more than just
yes,
reallocating, you'd like to at least discuss whether you should have a ward.
right. So we have a ward. So we want to have a committee or somebody look at.
So I guess that's what, are you guys interested in having more analysis from some people before we do stuff, or what's your, because Bob's just offering, Brian talked to me, he'd offered to kind of lead something to say, here's, kind of synthesize the information, maybe draw some pictures, make some recommendations to the board. We could go find, maybe somebody from every ward, or find somebody that likes from a ward or whatever, and discuss it with them or whatever. I mean, I don't mind as long as it's fairly quick, because we do have other people that are, we need to.
Yeah, we need to
You guys, I mean, do you think it's worth the time to look at?
Look, there's a disparity in the number of residents in each ward, in the wards.
Yeah,
If you're gonna add another one, you're gonna make it equal to
Right,
four,
Yeah,
or just,
basically equalize the wards and geographically make a little more sense out of them. We would have basically western part of the what used to be the wards was the railroad tracks, and so we would, from Hilltop west would be a new ward, basically the harbors and some of those subdivisions west of Hilltop. And then Hilltop would pick up those up to 109 or possibly even Elk Trails, which was the old ward one. And then in order to
So the three aldermen want to get together and come up with.
discuss it.
yeah, sure. We would have like streets with numbers and.
But you'd have to, the big one would be, you need one from each.
Yeah.
So, because otherwise, if we keep it at three, then we don't have
Jerry's
to
gonna
go to
take
meeting.
care of our work.
Well, it's
So Bob, Jerry, and Brian can work on this together and come up with a recommendation to the rest of the board.
It's up to you, I mean, you two need to
You got
decide
time?
between Carly, what you guys want to do.
Okay.
Jerry, I was
I'm
saying-
interested.
Both of you.
We can get together this
Well, I
week.
think you have to, you can't just make a decision.
No, I said they were gonna bring stuff back to the rest of them.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to see those stats and figures.
Yes, there's numbers.
They have more than
Yeah.
three.
Ward one is gonna be huge. When the artist gets in, we know there's something.
Why don't you guys talk about it at the meeting, figure
Yeah,
out.
that's fine.
I'll let you, I don't
Fine.
want. You'll do
I
it?
thought more than, I thought, as long as we're not voting on something, like if we're researching something, I thought we could get together for research. Is that not?
I think if you have more than three discussing
Yeah,
cities, it's a public meeting.
It's just open.
Got it.
But I mean, you can meet somewhere, you just have to be accessible.
Well, you can do a workshop where you are not making any decisions.
Yeah.
You can do that. But if, somebody needs
Come
to
up
take
here.
notes of what you're.
Well, I'd like to be there one way or another, so, I mean,
Why don't we know we got at least Jerry, we got Bob, and then we'll talk, you guys can figure it out, then we'll work it out, however you guys want to do it. I just want to make sure everybody who wants to has got a shot to look at it. And I do not want to go.
Why not?
What we at? That was, we got through one count. Good.
Save a mind for close.
All right. What else we got? Carly, go ahead.
I'm good.
She's good.
Surprise.
What are you, you're good? Good, all right, good. So we've got, nothing in the comments. So now we would, call for, everybody want to call for closed session?
Yes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're gonna go to closed session. That'll be the conclusion of our video portion of the program. And,
So next.
so you guys, we're gonna shut off the camera and,
You have to leave.
You all look wonderful on TV, by the way.
are you watching this on? We look good?
You need to move the microphone.
You can turn that up now?
Yeah, we'll need to get some of this stuff.
Did you bring Skittles for everybody?
Hey, you don't have to set your car alarm. Anyone.
Right there. Is the camera off?